CCU.
Bonsoir, mesdames, messieurs.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will be beginning the budget process this evening, and this evening we're going to hear from the external agencies. But first of all, I would ask that we observe a moment of silence for our friends from France and from Paris who were struck by that terrible tragedy.
Merci. Alors, on va commencer la présentation.
So, thank you very much. We were going to then hear from the RCMP this evening. Good evening, Mr. Beauchesne. Deputy Mayor, councillors, I'm here this evening to present my 2016 budget. I'd like to introduce the people accompanying me this evening. Mr. Charles Savoy, responsible for the municipal employees for the Kodiak Police Authority. Mrs. Debbie Hathaway is responsible for finances. We have a member of the CRPA, Mr. Charles Godet. And amongst you, you have Mr. Jean-Marc Brideau, who also sits on the Kodiak Regional Police Authority. Thank you, and good evening to all of you. And a little later, the president of the chair of our finance committee will take the floor a little later. And I will just get the PowerPoint started, if you may. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 140 regular member positions, 50 municipal employees, and 50 members that are used when necessary for vacancies, that responded to 120 1,000 calls for services last year. The RCMP has the confidence of the public at a level that had never been seen in the past. This confidence is evident in the way that people are engaged to help reduce criminality and to get involved. As responsible of your police services, my challenge is to maintain this level of confidence by remaining confident, transparent, professional and accountable. I will continue to evaluate our efficiency because I understand our position, and we need to find the balance between the services offered and cost. Here are a few examples of our efforts. The urban model that was set in 2014 continues to serve the three municipalities well. It was reinforced to support supervision and reducing overtime as much as possible, and to increase the well-being of the members. Two, being part of our urban model, the remote assistance group takes between 20 and 27% that doesn't require the police, 17 to 20% of that don't require the presence of the police, and they're dealt with at the desk or on the phone. This allows the regular members to spend more time on other responsibilities to improve the Kodiak's ability to offer police services. Number three, we have 5 reserve members who are used when necessary for vacancies. that for different events on the operational calendar, they are paid only when they work. They are qualified police officers, but don't cost the full cost of a regular member. Number 4, court documents are still handled electronically. And as we mentioned last year, Kodiak is the first service in New Brunswick to adopt this way of doing things. And this has allowed us to improve file management and to reduce many costs of officers having to appear in court, and has been well received by the justice system here in Moncton. Number 5, Kodiak continues to work with other social partners, including those who are involved in the improvement of the services for mental health in order to adopt a multifunctional and holistic approach to reduce criminality. For example, there's an agreement between the Crisis Intervention Center, and there's an agreement with them that was signed in August between them and the RCMP. And statistics show that this will free up frontline police officers, and more importantly, offers relevant services in a timely manner to those who most need it. Discussions are underway currently with local authorities to determine the type of services necessary to allow Kodiak members to sit with the patients when they are brought to the hospital for treatment. Number 6, there are no new human resources added this year to the RCMP. Furthermore, efforts have been made to reduce the 2016 budget by withdrawing 2 positions of municipal staff. These remained vacant in 2015 to allow us to restructure the workload between the municipal employees, and our analysis allowed us to permanently reduce the staff and about $100,000 from the budget. We are currently assessing the position of RCMP officer in the same line of thought. The police forces in Canada always have done more than just strictly fight against criminality and crime. The police has to adapt and has to be able to adapt quickly to all sorts of activities. We are involved in different activities such as 1, the maintain of peace and public safety, the maintain and the law enforcement of provincial, federal, and municipal acts and laws. 3, the supervision of people suspected of criminal activity, the detection of and investigations, crime prevention as well in all its forms, social development, and secondary, circumstantial, and tertiary. 6, to respond to urgent and civic emergencies. 7, to protect people, and more specifically the most vulnerable, such as Aboriginal women and children, those who are most vulnerable to violence, to sexual exploitation and bullying. 8, the protection of property. 9, the maintain of constitutional rights and freedoms, the support to victims of crime. 11, to serve the community with taking into account linguistic and cultural diversity. 12, partnerships with other police forces, security forces, different stakeholders and organizations. 16, communication with the public. 14, the criminal record checks for different organizations, volunteer organizations and communities. 15, the accountability towards the public, the training and professional development, and lastly, the efficient use of resources. As your police chief, I am very aware that police services today are more than just law enforcement. Our roles include a large range of services that are that are required and desired by the communities we serve. It is important for the members of the community, including those who take the policy and budget decisions, including yourselves, on police and social services, are informed of the realities of today. As we are starting this budget deliberation period, please take into account that police services are more than law enforcement. We are active in a whole range of services and activities as requested by the community. Statistics on crime only give one part of the total portrait of the services and must be used cautiously because they can give a skewed image of the costs and the benefits. At the same time as the police is searching internal efficiencies to reduce costs, inefficiencies in other parts of the justice system put a lot of pressure on the police budget. The police services are one of several sectors that contribute to the safety and the well-being of the community. That police services do a number of things because of a lack of capacity in other sectors and because the service offers services 24/7. For the police to work in partnership with other organizations, these organizations must be substantially funded and viable. The mobilization and training is key to have informed budget. Our challenge is to not lose the confidence of the public, as I mentioned at the beginning. I am here and I am engaged to continue to work towards reducing cost and improving efficiency of police services. So those are my opening words, and I'd like now to give the floor to Paul van der Sande, Chair of the Finance Committee for the Kodiak Regional Police Authority.
Thank you, Superintendent. Mr. Deputy Mayor and Councillors, I apologize once again for my lack of French. But I'll go through this and we can deal with any questions. Either if you want to interrupt me as I'm going through, or we can deal with them at the end. I have about 15 slides, and the very first slide is an update on the shooting that occurred in 2014. The other 14 slides are dealing with the 2016 budget request. An update on the shooting, as was presented to the council before, the total shooting costs were about $9 million. And the Kodiak share of that after negotiations was about $3.5 million. And we had struck an agreement with the federal government on an interest-free basis that they would bill us $1 million in 2015, $1 million in 2016, and $1.5 million in 2017. The plan was that the CRPA would absorb the $1 million in 2015 in normal operations, the $1 million in 2016 in normal operations, and we would special bill the municipalities for $1.5 million in 2017. And Dieppe's share of that would be approximately 18%. I'm pleased to report to the council that we are on plan. The CRPA is going to be able to absorb the $1 million in 2015, and we believe the $1 million in 2016. And the actual costs, after we tallied them up, are actually lower than we had estimated. So we had estimated that there would be a special billing in 2017 for $1.5 million, and we believe that's going to be closer to just over $1 million. So effectively, it's come in a little bit less than we had anticipated. I should point out, because some people are going to ask, if the CRPA can absorb $1 million in 2015, and they can absorb $1 million in 2016, well, why are they coming to the table with a request for more money for policing services? And the reason that we're able to absorb those costs in a large portion is that we're receiving billing credits from the RCMP. And the biggest component of that is that because of our contract with the federal government and the province, they have this mechanism that we're going to talk about. It's called division administration. And what happens is when we have people that are off on disability or paternity, they're after 30, well, on disability in particular, after 30 days, their payroll comes off our payroll, and all of their costs go into this pool at a provincial level, and those costs are allocated across all the RCMP detachments in the province, and we only absorb about 15% of that. So the advantage of this in this particular circumstance was that in the fall of 2014 and in the early part of 2016, we had a number of officers that were off. And after 30 days, their wage cost and benefit cost came off our books and effectively was thrown into the provincial pool, and that cost was kind of spread out across the province. What happened to us is that because we don't have those wage costs for those RCMP officers in our budget, we get a billing credit back from the RCMP for the expense that they expected to bill us if they were there, but they weren't. So in 2016, for example, we're getting billing credit of close to $1 million, which allows us to absorb that shooting cost component or bill that's coming through. And the reason I make this point is that the items that are allowing the CRPA to absorb the $1 million in 2015 and the $1 million in 2016 are non-repeatable credits. They're only there because of special circumstances. So it's not a credit that we have on an ongoing basis to apply to other expenses. In that particular case, the contract mechanism, the division administration, saved our bacon, so to speak. It helped us so that the end result is that the citizens of the Kodiak region only have to absorb a special billing of $1 million on a $9 million cost. And I think in anybody's optics, that's a pretty good result for the citizens of our 3 municipalities.
If you want to excuse me, I have a question here.
Sure.
Councillor Béliveau.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire suppléant. I'd like to better understand what you mean by somebody that's taken off the payroll at the local level. Their salaries, are they not now, or their remuneration, compensation, call it what you want, is it not going to be coming from their insurance, their disability insurance?
The RCMP is a self-funded organization. So effectively, when they come off, correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent, but they don't have disability insurance. The RCMP funds their own people when they're off. So when they come off our payroll after the 30 days, they're going into that provincial pool. And those are still RCMP costs, and they continue to pay them there along with, so not only do they pick up the salary plus the benefits, they also pick up any medical costs or any counseling costs or any other ancillary costs of the people that administer that program. And then those costs are all accumulated in that pool, and in our particular case, they take the total cost and they spread it over the total number of RCMP constables in the province. And then based on the number of constables that we have, they allocate the charge back to us through what is called a division administration charge. So no, they don't have disability insurance, they're self-funded.
So, but when you say self-funded, who funds it? Is it funded, is each detachment, is Kodiak billed for a certain portion of that every year?
Yes.
Okay, so basically it's funded locally.
Yes, for our pro rata share. That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Conseiller Godette.
Excuse, the number of constables or personnel in the province is what?
It was, do you know that offhand, Superintendent?
I would say between 850 and 900. I don't have the exact
850 plus?
850 plus?
Continue.
So let me talk about the overall budget request. The overall budget request has 3 buckets of costs in it. And effectively what we're asking for, our existing budget for 2015 was $27.5 million. For 2016, we're asking for an extra $2.5 million. There's really 3 buckets, if you will. 2 are operational and 1 is capital. First bucket is kind of the normal operational costs that you'll have, and I'll go through them in the next slide. Effectively, it's the salary increases, the rent increases, the vehicles, and pension increases, the stuff that you would normally assume that any operation would have. That comes to $943,000 out of the $2.5 million. The second bucket is the division administration. And division administration, as I mentioned previously, covers off two major factors, and again, there's another slide on this, but it covers off the services that we obtain from Fredericton, part of the administration functions up there, such as HR, procurement, communication services that are offered by the RCMP federally, plus about 17 other services that came through. That part really hasn't changed a whole lot. The part that's really affecting us and that's driving most of that $941,000 in that second block is effectively the disability costs and the paternity costs, where you have constables that are off. And the number and the cost of those 2 items has gone up substantially. And that's driving that particular item. Now, to be quite honest, 3 years ago, we had the same issue with division administration. This particular year, it's gone up from $4.3 million to $5.3 million. It's up $1 million in 1 year. And of course, we go back to the RCMP and we ask why. 3 years ago, we had the same issue. The division admin, the disability costs went up substantially. And effectively, we went back to the RCMP. They said, we've put a new system in place. We should be able to control it. Well, the same thing has happened again. The costs have gone up. The RCMP have come back again and said that we have, our previous plan is not working as effectively as we had hoped. We've re-engineered it, and we're pursuing an aggressive management philosophy on this, and we're taking a new approach. So we don't believe it's going to go up again. But when I look at this, at the end of the day, we can't control the number of people that are out on disability. Well, we can to some degree through good management, but it is one of those things that's going to fluctuate. When you look at paternity and you look at disability, it is going to go up and down. So we've got limited control over that particular bucket. The third bucket is effectively a capital request, and it's for a new radio system. That new radio system is going to run about $2 million. We had originally anticipated and negotiated with the federal government that $2 million cost, and I'll get into the reasons why as we go through the slides. We had negotiated with them that they would spread that cost over 3 years. So effectively, we've got $2 million. Our agreement with the federal government, in our agreement with the federal government, we have to absorb 90% of that cost. The feds cover 10%. And then if you spread it over 3 years, you come up with a cost of $612,000. In our discussions with the Insight Committee, which is the 3 city managers and the 3 chief financial officers, the question was asked, where this is a capital request, where the life of this radio system is approximately 15 years, and the CRPA not go out and borrow the money themselves, spread it over 10 years, and charge us less. So the second number you see there is on the premise that the CRPA would go to the Capital Borrowing Board at the province, borrow the $2 million, and then effectively spread the charge over 10 years. And that would reduce that request to $216,000, lowering the overall request by $400,000. Your 18% would be about $70,000. We have looked into that after the discussion with the Insight Committee. We've checked, we have never borrowed before directly. So this is new ground for us. But we have looked into it. There appear to be no roadblocks, either under the Police Act or under our bylaws. Through the assistance of the finance folks at the City of Moncton, we've had discussions with the province, and it appears that we can move ahead with obtaining financing on our own. And so it looks more likely that the lower number there, the 216,000, will be the appropriate number. So let me continue on this, and I'll touch on each one of these buckets in detail. First one is the operational expenses. You can see there that effectively the first item is just the normal increases in wages. They run between 1 and 2.5%. That's 520 out of the 943. The second item is we had an increase last year in our pension rate. There's a committee struck for the RCMP. It's a committee of 3. One is appointed by the RCMP constables, one's appointed by the RCMP, and one's an independent. They look at the financial state of the pension plan, and they make a recommendation on the contribution rate. That rate went up last year.
I do have another question from Councillor Nolan.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire Adjoint. For just going back to the radio system, now, if the CRPA does go to the capital borrowing board to get the money, that would mean the system would be implemented sooner,
No.
I'm assuming?
No.
No, so it would still be over 3 years by the time that it's fully operational?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And that schedule is being driven not only by our situation right here, but because it's being implemented across the province. And they had originally looked at doing it sooner, but the municipalities around the province kind of pushed back and said we can't afford it. So then they kind of went with a 3-year plan. So it's being driven by fiscal constraints.
Conseiller Béliveau.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire Adjoint. Who is going to have to take the responsibility of the debt ratio for the loan if that's the chosen approach? In other words, you're going to be borrowing over $2 million. Is it the police authority that will have that as a debt credited to them, and the municipalities do not have to share proportionately? Because if we were to borrow money, it takes away from our availability, our space, our room. Is this going to apply or not apply? So the question is, are we going to be responsible for the loan, or is it the police authority itself?
I'm going to give you half an answer on that, Councillor, because I don't know the complete answer. I know that if we go to borrow, we will require pro rata guarantees from each municipality because we have no assets of our own. So right off the bat, there will be a guarantee required. As far as whether it comes into the debt ratios of each individual municipality, I would have to look back to either the city manager or the chief financial officer for an answer to that, because, quite honest, we don't have any experience with it, and I'm not sure how the municipal debt ratios work.
I think it's fair for us to want to make sure we know exactly what we're getting ourselves into. Okay, thank you.
The third item there is the replacement of vehicles for $110,000. As you might expect, the RCMP have rules on their vehicles. They replace them after so many kilometers or after so many years in age because they may be involved in high-speed chases. We deferred the purchase of 3 vehicles last year because of fiscal constraints. They were kind of on the edge. We had another 2 that were involved in accidents in 2015, and effectively that based on the normal criteria for replacing those vehicles, their cost is going to be up by $110,000. The fourth item there is an increase in the rent for the police building in Moncton. We've had a number of discussions with the chief financial officer for the city of Moncton on this. For some reason, he wants to get a fair market value rent plus all his costs back. and he wants the three municipalities to share in that proportionately. When we initially looked at this, we thought the rent increase, to be quite honest, was outrageous because it's $30 a square foot for a Class B building, and that is high. So we've had a number of discussions over this. What it breaks down to, it makes sense after you get into the detail. What it breaks down to is effectively it's $10 net rent, which is the market value for Class B space, which this would be in downtown Moncton. So I don't have a problem with that. The part that's high is in the common area costs, and that's $20 per square foot, which I'm used to seeing commercial buildings that are 10 to 15 per square foot. But in this particular case, the reason it's high, there's two reasons. One is that, number one, this facility operates 24 hours. So obviously the cleaning and everything else, and the heat bills and the electricity and so on and so forth, is higher than a normal commercial building. And secondly, there are other services in there like janitorial. So when I look at it, so what he's trying to do is he's trying to get the $10 per square foot plus all the costs that he's paying for what is, to be quite honest, an older building. So it's not as efficient as it would be for a newer building. How that compares to the rent that Dieppe charges, just for comparison, is that you're charging, I think it's $21 a square foot. But if you add in the other costs that are included in the rent for Moncton, it comes up to $26 a square foot. So it's 26 versus $30 a square foot. And to be honest, all he's trying to get back is the $10 plus the cost that he's paying out on an older building. So it is what it is. It's not perfect from our perspective, but there is a rationale behind it. And then there's some miscellaneous costs, $1,000. So when we look down that list, I don't think there's anything that's outrageous on that particular bucket, if you will. Let me go to the next item.
Question from Councillor Béliveau.
So, Monsieur le Maire suppléant, I can understand that there's rationale and information that can be provided to explain just about everything. I'm just noting that an increase of close to 11%, I believe, is what we've, 9.73. I'm going to round that off to 10%. It's that it becomes a cost that's totally non-controllable by the city of Dieppe. And when we make comparisons between the police station being 24/7, I agree with you there. I'd have to suspect that the volume of traffic through the common areas from anywhere around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evenings until early next morning are not that significant. And we also have a 911 center in Dieppe, and that's 24/7. There's not too many walk-ins, I agree, but that center is active at all times. So here we have an older building, we have a newer building, and the newer building is costing us less. I'm finding that although it might not be considered significant, it is $104,000 to which we have to pay our share of an increase, and that expense is totally non-controllable. So I'm putting that out there, that I find that unfortunate. We have no say in that at all. But it is what it is, I guess is how I could say that.
The only comment I would have here, Councillor, because you bring up a point that's not really pertinent to this, but which is a long-term issue. As you say, this is $104,000. Your share is only 18%, so it's $18,000 or $19,000. So on a $30 million budget, that's not a huge amount. The bigger issue that you're raising, though, is that the police are going to require a new building. And when you get into the new building, there will have to be an agreement struck between the three municipalities as to the long-term sharing, which will allow you to have some control over those costs. Now, that's a separate committee has been struck to deal with the building, so I'm not going to talk about it tonight.
That's not lost. That's not lost, I assure you.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Another question from Councillor Godet.
So the way you explain it, it looks like there's a $4 per square foot various undefined benefit for Moncton?
The rent for the Moncton building is $4 per square foot higher than the Dieppe building that we use for the call center, yes.
But that was not my question. My question was, do I understand from your explanation that there's a $4 profit or benefit for Moncton on each square foot?
No, I believe that is incorrect. If I separate the components of the rent, the net rent, and the common area charges, if you will, the common area charges are costs that Moncton are actually paying out on our behalf. So that's out of pocket for them. And all they're asking for is for Dieppe to contribute their pro rata share, 18%, of those out-of-pocket costs. Okay, so that seems fair. I don't think anybody can argue with that part. The other part is a $10 net rent. And because Moncton has funded the police station, they want to receive a rent for the use of that facility by the CRPA. And because the CRPA includes Dieppe and Riverview, then effectively you are paying Moncton for $10 net. You're paying your share of the net rent on that, which, to be quite honest, I don't see as unfair either, because they invested the money to put up the building in the first place. They should get a net rent from it. I would, if it was my building, I would expect a net rent, and I'm sure you would as well.
The difference is municipalities or sharing between municipalities. The objective is not making profit, but of service. And that's where, so instead of $4, basically you're saying that they're charging us $10 for a bill, for the use of a building that's been long paid for.
Yes, that's fair. That's correct. But if Dieppe had funded the building in the first place on your own tab, I expect you would want Moncton and Riverview to pay as well.
I think we did, over the years, pay our very fair share.
Okay.
Merci, conseiller Odette. Question de conseiller Cormier.
Would it be fair to compare the operating cost of the police station to a fire station per square feet?
To be honest, Councillor, I have no idea. We have struck, the City of Moncton has struck a separate committee to take a look at the police station, to address the location of it, and to look at the costs, the initial capital costs, plus the operating costs. That subcommittee has representation both from Dieppe and from Riverview. What the long-term incremental cost of that is going to be and how it compares to the fire facilities, to be honest, I don't know. However, before we go ahead with a new police building, there will be, I expect, long and involved discussions with the three municipalities, because Moncton is certainly not going to fund a facility without Dieppe and Riverview also coming to the table. So there will be long discussion on that, including the cost, the options, so on and so forth.
Merci, conseiller Cormier. Maintenant, une autre question du conseiller Nolan.
Merci, Monsieur Maire Adjoint. As part of the 31 municipal support services positions, does that not include the cleaning staff at Kodiak? Or are they billed through that rent charge? Okay, but we manage those employees, or you manage those employees? Okay.
Merci, conseiller Nolan. Vous pouvez continuer.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan.
The next slide, effectively, you can see the breakdown of our division admin charge. This overall, if I go the right way here. This overall charge is $941,000, our overall increase. And you can see if you go down the left-hand side, that's the services provided from the division. That's only $111,000 out of the $941. If you go down the right-hand side, as I noticed previously, there's two items. One is that the costs are up. The costs are up by about $525,000 for the disability. And the number of RCMP constables that we share the charge over is actually down, which means that we absorb more. And what has happened is that the province has reduced the number of constables through re-engineering, so they've dropped by about 50 constables from what they had last year. And because of that, you spread the costs over a smaller pool, and we get a higher allocation. At the end of the day, this is a contractual responsibility. We don't have any control over it. The only thing we can do is ask the RCMP to endeavor to manage it better, but it's going to go up and down. Our best estimate of the future costs on this, because we're concerned, as was mentioned by one of the councillors, about controllability, is that it should be flat from this point forward. We know that the province has actually increased the number of constables for 2016, which helps us somewhat. So it's first they cut them and then now they're adding them. But at the end of the day, it is what it is, and effectively the RCMP are working diligently, and the superintendent has told me what he's doing, and he is working on those individual cases that are out there to see what can be done. So there's not much we can do about it, I think, is kind of the end of the story on that item. The comments on this page is just a rehash of what I already mentioned. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'll go to the next slide. The new radio system. What happened with the radio system is that the province in June of 2015 decided that they were going to, we had an old system and the RCMP had been after them for years. It was installed back in the 1990s. The RCMP had been after the province for years to upgrade the system. And a couple of things happened. Number one, Nova Scotia and PEI upgraded their system. And they all want the same system, so it's interoperability. So if you have an officer in one jurisdiction, he goes to another, he can talk to the people in the other jurisdiction. And the second thing is that in the McNeil report that was done after the shootings in Kodiak, effectively it identified that the radio system had deficiencies. So given those two factors, the province made the decision to upgrade across the province the radio system. And of course, if they upgrade, and we have officers here that in an emergency will move outside of the Kodiak region to go to St. John or wherever, or alternatively, if we have another incident like we had in the shooting, and we have officers coming in, they need to be able to speak to each other. So when you look at that from the CRPA's point of view, this is a must-have item for both public and officer safety. It's just not something that we can do without. And the last point I would make about it, because the old system was installed in 1990s, the sustainability of that infrastructure is becoming an issue for us. And obviously, you can't have your 9/11 system go down in any type of situation.
We have another question from Councillor Béliveau.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire suppléant. You did mention at the beginning, sir, that the province had announced that it needed to modernize the system, their system. Is the province putting in some money?
Yes, the way the $2 million in costs is only for the mobile equipment that the officers carry the repeater units that they put in their vehicles to give them range, and the workstations that we have at the 9/11 Center. There's a bunch of little stuff, but those are the main components of the $2 million. In addition to that, effectively, you've got costs for all of the infrastructure, the towers, the back-end systems. And they're leasing that from, I believe it's one of the providers like Bell. And so effectively the $2 million in cost that we're talking about is the equipment that's going to end up here in Kodiak. It does not include the cost of airtime, similar to a cell phone that you would have, that will be an additional annual operating charge. And we estimate that to be close to $325,000 per year. Now, there is we need to have further discussions, because in our discussions, they base their pricing on the costs for the Nova Scotia and PEI systems. That's kind of where they got some of the projections for the costs. But one of the questions is, what they did is they're kind of taking the total charge here, they're allocating it over the total number of users in the province, but there will be some cases, perhaps St. John will not come on right away because they're not RCMP, but later on there will be a user, there will be 200 people that effectively would be additional users. And there will be other detachments here and there, maybe fisheries, maybe whoever. And in our questions to the RCMP, we wanted to make sure that any sort of cost sharing would be allocated proportionately. So we would get our pro rata share based on the number of users here in Kodiak, and that the costs are being allocated appropriately. I should mention with respect to that, we have had some very preliminary discussions on these costs, because you're looking at $2 million up front, spread over 3 years or 10 years, depending on how we fund it. Plus you're talking an annual cost of $325,000, which we don't pay anything right now. So there's an incremental cost there. We have had discussions with other federal enforcement agencies that have expressed an interest in us expanding our 9/11 call center here to service their requirements across New-Brunswick and a wider area. And it's currently serviced from another area, but they're having trouble with the bilingual aspect of having their call operators. And they need that bilingual aspect, and they're thinking that this area would be much better suited for their requirements. If that happens, then we would expand our call center, and we would recoup some of these costs, perhaps not the mobile workstations or the radios, but with respect to the airtime, plus a profit factor, of course, that we would charge, we may be able to mitigate some of that ongoing annual operating cost. So we're looking into that. You don't like to count a bird in the hand until you actually have an agreement, but we're optimistic that there's at least potential there for us to offset some of those costs.
So what you're saying is that we're currently not being billed for airtime, but we will be billed somewhere in the range of some $300,000 a year?
Starting in 2019.
Is that not something, if the province wants that interconnection between all the players, why wouldn't the province put in a big chunk of money to finance that element? Because the system's no good if you get no airtime, right?
No good at all, obviously. Their current approach has been to take the total airtime bill and allocate it based on the number of users. So they have not been very receptive to the thought of them kicking in additional money at this point in time. Now, I might add that they do contribute. We negotiate with the 9/11 services and get a feedback for every 9/11 call fielded here. And we recently renegotiated that rate. It went up by a third to 50%. So we do get some funding back on the 9/11, but on this airtime, I'm I'm a little pessimistic as to, given the provincial fiscal situation, that we're going to get much more money from them.
Merci.
Merci, conseiller Béliveau. Maintenant, on est déjà 20 minutes
Thank you, Councillor Béliveau.
late on our schedule, so if you could
Accelerate?
move.
Yep. I talked about the radio system. Let me just talk about the funding allocation here. This has changed slightly from what we gave to the councillors before. And the number here actually, if we go with the CRPA funding the radio system, would be an allocation of $360,000 over what you paid previously. So it's a little less than is on the chart there. Just continue here. Some people might ask, why don't we fund from within? The issue we have is that our staffing is one of the lowest in Canada. If you look at this chart that was done in 2013, it's the number of police officers per 100,000 population, and you will see the third from the top, Moncton is the lowest. That was confirmed by the next slide, which was a Fraser report issued in 2014. Again, it's looking at the efficiency of police forces, and Moncton is number 1 on the list. So we don't believe that we can decrease the staffing of police officers that we have in our community. Some people might also ask, if you can't reduce staffing, well, perhaps we're paying too much for RCMP services. And what I would say to them is that the Kodiak region selected the RCMP after an exhaustive analysis. We then received a 10% decrease when we renegotiated the contract. The RCMP compensation, when you rank about against 9 comparative police forces, is 5th in the country, so they don't appear, their total package doesn't appear to be overpaid. And all of the increases that we're talking about tonight, we would have whether it was an RCMP force or a municipal force. I would also point out, we did a comparison between communities. We took the total cost of policing divided by the population of the census metropolitan area. We've compared it to Halifax. We had numbers for 2014 and St. John, and we compared Kodiak, and we are the lowest of the 3 as far as the cost of policing goes per 100,000 population. And then talk about where do we expect our costs to go in the future. We expect them to level off, with the exception of the shooting bill that's going to come through next year for approximately $1 million. So we would expect normal inflationary increases in the next 4 to 5 years, with the exception of the police building, of which impact we'll be discussing with you separately. Now, our crystal ball is no better than anybody else's. If we have a murder or a kidnapping in our community, and we incur, of course, overtime in pursuing that, then our costs are going to be high. But giving normal caseload, we would expect that after next year, the costs would increase on a normal inflationary basis. I guess in summarizing, Mr. Deputy Chair and councillors, at the end of the day, the members of the CRPA board, with the exception of the councillors that are on there, are members of the community. We recognize that our mandate is to provide appropriate police services at a reasonable cost. To be quite honest, given what we're faced with, we don't see many viable alternatives to this budget request. We've tried to look in areas that we can cut staff. We've looked at things we can do. The superintendent mentioned this at the very start of the budget presentation, but we just don't see any alternatives. 90% of our costs are effectively our staff and allocations that we get because of the number of staff that we have. We don't have any control over that. So the amount of overhead expenses, if you will, that we would have is minimal. It really comes down to staffing, and we don't believe, given our position vis-a-vis all of the other police forces across the country, that we can decrease staffing and strike the right balance. That's my presentation, Mr. Deputy Mayor. If there's any other questions, I can deal with them, or the superintendent can.
Any other question from the member? If not, thank you for your presentation, and we'll take your presentation into consideration when we discuss the budget. Thank you. Oh, there's one question.
C'est pas son domaine.
It's not for him. This is probably for the superintendent. A question for the superintendent. My question is, the president of the commission is a councillor of a municipality, am I right? Please speak in the mic. Yes, for the policing authority? We have an interim chair, Mr. Charles Léger. Is that normal, that it be the elected council that be president, even by interim? En ce qui concerne la PRC, is that he's wearing an...
Représentant d'une ville, quand il arrive en groupe de la CRPA, il peut prendre le rôle de l'exécutif.
As a PRC, he can assume the role of executive. A hat with a contraction. We will now go to the second group, which is 3+, so we're a little late on our agenda. We'll try to catch up. I don't know who is presenting for 3+. Mr. Deputy Mayor, good evening. Good evening, Mr. Shampoo, councillors. I'm happy to be here again tonight. I would like to mention the president of Jim Lockyer, president of our board of directors, and Fred Gianet, which is a director of 3+, and you also know Louis Godbout of Expansion Dieppe, who is with us as well. Thanks for inviting us again tonight. I'll try to be brief. They told me I should really stick to the budget and leave a certain amount of time for questions. So I will go a bit quickly. And I see that you're nodding your heads. Yes, so you agree. You recognize us as a corporation for Dieppe, Moncton, and Riverview. I won't pass much time on that. The structure is about the same. We have, as a strategy, an investment structure. Before we had business, retention, and investment together, but we've separated them and created a center for services to businesses.
And this service is what helps existing businesses. So there's three main pillars to this structure, similar to the past years, and I will be happy to speak to you at greater length if you want. Now you see here the structure of the board of directors and the 3+ team. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to point out the exceptional work done by Lise Laboutillier and Guy Duguay, who are the two Dieppe representatives on the board, appointed by your council, and they do a great job. They work very hard in representing your interests. I know you know them well. Also, Mr. Duguay has worked for Expansion Dieppe during a number of years, so he's very familiar with the whole field of economic development. And it's a great pleasure to have these two people on the board. The 3+ team, I don't want to go through all the names. I just wanted to mention that there are 10 people currently, and it's probably the smallest size team in the last few years. So once again, we want to make sure that we do more with less to become as efficient as possible to really maximize the return on investment for the municipality and our taxpayers. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this either, because I was told to focus instead on the budget itself and not our realizations, our accomplishments. But this year we did have one objective of creating 360 jobs. We were already at 568 by the end of October. So things are moving along very nicely. We have a positive momentum in the city of Moncton, in the whole area, rather, of the greater Moncton. A lot of the stakeholders involved in the regional development and the whole greater community works very hard. You have a number of projects here in Dieppe, in the uptown, in the downtown, and different areas of Dieppe. And they're not exceptions to the rule. There's really a great positive momentum in the whole greater Moncton area. And although it's really functioning on all cylinders here, if you will. So everybody's working together. The 568 jobs that were created this year, with the participation of 3+, represents more than $1 million to the tax base in property tax, and more than $43 million for total economic impact. So that's the importance of the jobs that have been created thus far. So we're really pleased also to report that there are almost 2,000 jobs down the pipeline currently. Some investment, possible potential investments that we're working on that would represent the creation of 2,000 further jobs. So we're really thrilled and very enthusiastic with the number of jobs that are the result of all of these files we're working on. That once again, this gives us a clear indication, as we mentioned earlier, of all of the positive things that are happening in the Greater Moncton area. Here you see the distribution of the budget. The city of Dieppe represents 13.1% of the total budget of 3+. The private sector now represents almost a third of the total budget of the corporation, and for the last few years. So we haven't had to ask for more money from the municipalities because we've been able to obtain extra funding from the private sector. Now, here you can see the distribution between the three cities for the last number of years. What we're requesting from the three cities is unchanged compared to last year. And for Dieppe, we're talking about $165,000, which is almost exactly the same as last year. And I mentioned earlier that the total demand, the total request for funding has remained unchanged over the last 3 years. And we notice the increase over the last 8 years here. That is very stable as well compared to the total budget of 3+. And as I mentioned earlier, the reason for this is that we have support from the private sector. We've been able to get this extra funding from the private sector, which, once again, is an indication of this positive momentum in the whole Greater Moncton area. And we're very happy that the private sector is there to support the municipalities and that it is aware of the fact that the municipalities have played an important leadership role in economic development in the Greater Moncton area, and the private sector has decided it's not only up to the taxpayers to support this, because the impact is positive for everybody, though we want to get even more involved. And you can see here how it's gone from 157,000 in 2007 to 400,000 this year from the private sector. So once again, this reflects the level of confidence here in the regional economy and the level of support of the three municipalities. I don't want to read this slide in detail, but you see the list of the 109 business investors who contribute to this $400,000. So we're very pleased with the support we get from the private sector. This is a slide we like to show. It shows the phenomenal growth of the tax base here in the Greater Moncton area. 10 or 15 years ago, it was $4.3 billion, and it's tripled since then. So a number of people are very envious of this slide here, even here in the Maritimes. Now, I don't want to go over all of the details of these figures either. I just wanted to explain the distribution of our total budget of $1.2 million. Here you see administration and overhead. That's about 38% of the total budget. And it's pretty low, actually, overall, compared to others. Investment attraction and expansion, 37%. The center, the business service center, which plays a major role here in the Greater Moncton area, is 24% for a total of $1.2 million. And out of this 1.2, we get 400,000 from the private sector. You'll see that on the right-hand side. Also, $156,000 is received from other government levels through different programs. For example, we have different programs for support to new business ventures. And so these two together give $556,000. And the difference between that and our total of budget of $1.2 million is $705,773, and that's the amount that we need to receive from the municipalities, as we mentioned earlier, which is unchanged compared to last year. And the three municipalities got together and agreed on a slight change to the formula for this distribution. It used to be population-based, but the three municipalities got together a year and a half ago and said, no, we'd prefer that it's on according to the tax base. So you'll see the tax base of the three municipalities and the percentage of each. And that determines the part of the $700,000 that each will be asked, and therefore Dieppe's part would be $165,000. And here you see a summary all of this. You see the Dieppe contribution, which represents 13% of the total budget of 3+, and on the right you see the expenses and how they're distributed for a total of $1.2 million. And that is an overhead of our budget 2016 and what we are requesting from Dieppe, and we're here to answer your questions if you have any. Thank you. Thank you. And are there any questions for Mr. Champoux? There are none. So congratulations for your great job. Thank you so much.
Alors, on va continuer avec la...
We'll move on. The next presentation will be from Kodiak Transpo. Good evening. Good evening.
And the staff, thank you for inviting us to present the transit budget this evening. I just wanted to start by saying we're very happy to be your service provider, and we thank you for allowing us to work with your Councillor Cormier and Luc Richard, who we meet with regularly at our governance committee. Our focus is to increase passenger ridership, and that's been the focus this year of our governance committee. So I just wanted to highlight a few things that we've done in this regard. And many of these promotions have been supported by councillors in attending them, so I appreciate that support very much, as do the staff. We have overall ridership growth this year from January to September of 3.7%. So this is a tri-community number, and this has been driven primarily from initiatives. A lot of them have been free ridership promotions. So these are, for example, in July and August, we had high school students traveling for free. And in October, we had 10 ride punch cards that were for 50% off. And tomorrow, actually, we have a food drive, and it's free for anyone that brings a non-perishable food item. So all of these initiatives have helped get new customers to try transit, and that's really been the goal of these programs. And this continues to be the focus of the governance committee. So we will not be increasing rates next year. Passengers will pay the same rate. We haven't increased fares since 2012, and that's being done intentionally to try to continue to increase new passengers. And one other initiative that came from our governance committee as well was to, as of July 1st, we have a new linguistic requirement for all new operators. So they have to have basic French and English skills. And we have also implemented a training program for our existing operators. And we've had 9 transit drivers sign up for that program. So these are people that don't have skills in French but want to learn. So we're really happy with that for an initial turnout. And I thank Councillor Cormier and the committee for the work on that initiative, and certainly it was driven by this council and the staff. So it's a very positive thing, and it allows us to give better customer service. So I'm going to turn to Greg Hauser now. He's Deputy Treasurer, and he's going to present just a quick overview of the budget.
Mayor, councillors, and staff. Just take a few minutes to look at the budget, and there we go. Okay, good. That's better. And basically, just go through a few of the slides we brought just to highlight the items. Basically, right now, as we go currently in the projection to the end of September, we're actually ahead of plan. If you notice the total expenditures, this is for the total operation, not just Dieppe's portion. It's $10,593,275 versus $10,286,000. A lot of that's attributed to some savings on casuals, the bus drivers, regular bus drivers actually, because they're out on sick. And you've got some significant fuel savings there that's driving things. The fuel rates are down, so we're actually, one of the benefits of that, we're actually able to incorporate that, as you'll see in the budget, to garner those savings across the board for all the municipalities going into 2016. So that's certainly a benefit. And if we look at basically the actual city of Dieppe, if we get into the actual portion that city of Dieppe is responsible for, the expenditure side being, the administrative expenses, the building expenses, and the actual bus operations, those expenditures in 2015 budget were basically $945,000. Projections $913 in the 2016 budget, they're going to be $890. A lot of that, like I said, is related to fuel. Fuel prices are down. We're reflecting that in the costs. We're managing costs
very tightly on both the admin. Building costs are up slightly, and I'll explain that on the next slide, but only minimally. The operating labor will actually be down because of the ability to reduce some casuals, just because of the way the staffing's been gone and analyzing and keeping tighter control on staff. So at the end of the day, the total budget before revenue will be 1109, and the replacement bus is 69,000. The only item that's actually up, and that's basically because of history you'll see here, we've got $185,000 that's spent on direct bus maintenance, which is what that is. That's basically the maintenance that's been done on the Dieppe buses specifically to the end of September. And if you remember last year's budget, when we described it, one of the initiatives that we had gone through was to be able to bill directly for any bus repairs. So every single, Riverview gets billed for their buses, Dieppe gets billed for your buses for any repairs, and Moncton looks after their own. So that's basically what the direct bill is. So, there's been significant expenses. So you'll notice in discussions with Dieppe staff, with the Kodiak staff, that they felt, the 185 may be a bit of an anomaly, but still to, instead of putting the 104 that was put in last year, a suggestion to put in the 150,000 for next year's bus maintenance. Obviously, in the future, that can be, that can be reduced with, subsequent purchase of new buses, things like that, and they'll continue to monitor ways to make sure preventive maintenance gets done properly. But it is as the buses age, those costs continue to go up.
Excuse me, I think I have a question from Conseiller Béliveau.
Yes, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire Suppléant. On your first column, the 2015 budget,
Yes.
is that up to September 30th as well?
No, that would be.
Is that the total budget?
That would be that would be a projection to the end of the year. Okay, so they're both total budgets. The 2015 is basically, as we know today, as of September forecast, it is for the full year. I'm sorry I didn't explain that clear enough. So it's the full year.
So the first column, the 945 would have been the expenditures for the whole year?
As is the second column, and it's just as of September 30th, as the projection was done as of September 30th. So they are both full year numbers. The middle column is.
Okay, fine. All right. That's good. Merci.
Merci, Conseiller Béliveau.
And so basically, we've estimated $257,000 for revenue. A lot of that basically manage the revenue to keep it pretty flat because, as Angela had mentioned, there's a lot of initiatives on the go to build ridership. That gross revenue will eventually grow as the riders come on, as you develop more riders, that continuous. So I can anticipate in 2017, with the initiatives that are on the go, you'll start seeing that growing, and every dollar on the bus, you've got sunk costs in the buses going around, so every person you get on the bus is added to reducing the subsidy that and the cost that everybody's paying. And the last line is direct build shelter maintenance. As you know, you do have some shelters that we do minimal work on, and that's basically the direct bill. Any bills that come in from the supplier, they get directly passed on, and there's no, that's a direct cost to the city, or to the app. And finally, this is a breakdown of how the expenses have gone, and just the admin expenses actually, that is a share for the city of Dieppe, is basically 111,000. Last year is 117,000, so those have dropped. Building expenses are up to 51. They were 49. The only reason they're up, property taxes are up slightly, as is some repairs and contracts, just normal, basically pretty much inflationary increases. The operating labor is down. Fuel's down, basically is just about 10%, and service crew is pretty much flat, and that's basically only increased by the cost of labor based on the contract in place. As I mentioned earlier, the replacement buses is the cost of having buses available at any point in time when your buses are down. And as you see, the direct build maintenance is up because there has been more repairs, so those buses available, very important to all the municipalities, that when a bus goes down, there's something available to make sure that they can be covered off. So overall, once again, it's really just a repeat of the previous slide, that the total budget is 855, 512, and if we go back to the previous page, you'll see that the last year's budget was 835, 271. So it is up $20,000, which is really driven by the direct build bus maintenance. That's what's driving the cost going up. So Other than that, it's very prudent, from an operation point of view, really trying to maintain costs and keep the system affordable for all the users. Any questions?
Merci. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Dallaire. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
My question pertains to the building expense differences for 2015. Did I understand correctly that that's attributed that it was underestimated the amount of property taxes that would be incurred on that building and there were repairs that were needed in 2015?
And basically for 16, property taxes have been estimated they will grow slightly, so that's one component. The other component is just normal maintenance contractual things outside, because one of the things that happened from the snow budget in 2015, we had significant more costs, so we have put a little bit more in for the snow costs for 2016.
Okay, so that we had estimated in 2015 631 468, and that we incurred 684 756. Is that because of the snow removal then, or were there other components of that in 2015 explaining that big jump in costs for 2015?
Most of it's snow, and the other one is utility, is the natural gas prices through the early in the year. They really were peaked. They were somewhere around 12 to 15 gigajoules per gigajoule. Now they're back down to somewhere around 7 to 8 in that range. So we got hit very early, of course, when you needed to use the most natural gas. That was one of the big issues.
Okay, thank you.
Merci, Madame Dallaire.
Thank you, Madame Dallaire. Councillor Godet. Yes, on the ridership. I'm not sure I understood correctly. Your ridership statistics, you didn't give them earlier, did you?
A year to date, so it's from January to September 2015 compared to the same period in 2014. There's an increase of 3.7% in total ridership. So this is for our whole service, all three communities. This is how we measure it. And this is the type of information we provide this quarterly to our governance committee.
Est-ce que vous avez les...
But do you have the numbers for Dieppe?
I would work with Luc on that. I would say it's a little complex to analyze all the data. You have a lot of data from Dieppe because you have counters on all three buses, so every boarding, there's a recording of that. And it's possible to go through, it's just a bit time consuming, but I don't have the number ready for you right now. But it's certainly something I can work on with Luc.
Because I had asked several times already, and we still don't have them. Now, another question, and perhaps this isn't a valid comparison for 2014 because of the work short stoppage, but compared to 2011, 2012, 2013, has the ridership gone up?
Numbers we're using today are from automated passenger counters that we purchased and installed in 2014. So the only true data that we can compare is from last year to this year. Prior to that, we didn't have counters on any of our routes in any community, and what we did was an annual count, like just a few days maybe on some of the routes. It's not as detailed. So it's very difficult to go back and compare. The other thing, in 2013, we redesigned service, and in Dieppe, I believe it was 2014. So those comparators would be really difficult to make because the route numbers changed, the service areas changed. So generally, what we're trying to analyze now is from the time we purchased and installed counters to today, because it's very relevant information to compare from year to year. And as we go forward, we can continue to do that.
And the other thing that we have to measure is the quantity of money that is collected. But I would like to see those statistics. I have another question on the health of the buses. I think that 450 got some major repairs. Is it in good health today? And how many years does it have left? Does it have a new lease on life?
You're correct. There was significant repair to the frame of that bus in August, and it's not a complete frame overhaul. It was partial, and we're doing that on not just that unit, but many other buses have the same structural issues because of their age and the mileage on them. But I can tell you the direct maintenance costs after that in September and October, for example, were much lower. $2,000-3,000 a month compared to $13,000-15,000 a month. So I would, I'm not forecasting that you'll have significant repairs again in 2015, but it could happen next year or in 2017. It's, I can't give you a definite on what the future repair costs may be.
Mais combien de longueur de...
But how much... what is its lease on life? How long would you calculate it has?
Service route, so it's only used at peak hours. So you're already extending its life by putting it on a route where the mileage demands are lesser. And it's being properly maintained. It's definitely safe. And I mean, no bus leaves the building if it's not safe. So any concern like that is addressed. We have buses in service, to be honest with you, that are 25 years old. So there's really there's no end date that we have hit yet. We've been able to repair buses much longer than when we bought them. They said they would last because of the reality that we have to. We just don't have the money to go replace them. So I have buses in Moncton in service that are 25 years old, and they're still on the road today. So it's challenging for my mechanics, but...
Des autobus...
But the same model buses?
They're used buses that we bought also that have high mileage, different models again, and they have high repairs, but we're able to keep them operational.
Et la 700
And the 700 and 701 are in good shape?
Have high mileage, so all those two buses are your workhorses. They're assigned all the time to your busiest routes, and they don't get much of a break. So they're collecting mileage regularly, annually. So you're going to have regular repairs on those as well. The repair cost that you're seeing in your monthly statements, it can be translated to all three models. It shows a breakdown by model in the invoices. But I don't want you to think there's no cost for the other two. There are, brakes. There's some engine work that was done on one. There's a lot of different components that are itemized there. So there are charges for repairs to the other two units that are younger.
Merci, bonne chance.
Merci.
Thank you and good luck. Mr. Melanson? Yes, I'd just like to inform councillors that last year we had launched a bus replacement program. So we were on the right track in order to start planning the replacement of our buses on a regular basis. So the program was implemented in 2015. And yes, we have to increase the amount to make sure that for the acquisition, but we've already taken a step in the right direction. Thank you, Madame Hélène, for your presentation. And we will take it into account when we discuss the budget.
Now we'll go to the Capitol Theatre presentation by Ms. Kim Rayworth. You have regained your time. Congratulations. you can hear me. Thanks for inviting me. Good evening. I would have liked to come to see you earlier this fall. I had called the clerk. I would have liked to give you a presentation of our season, but now I'm here to talk about budgets. It's very exciting, I know. It's necessary, and I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about our budget. As everyone knows, Marc Chouinard here, it was very difficult for our team. It was very sad to lose him, but he had a lot of trust in our team. We work very hard, and we talk to him every day like he must be rolling in his grave. We do things to please him, but we're working very hard for the Capitol Theatre, and we love it. We've been there for a long time. I was part of the team before 6 years, before I became director in May. The board had started a very public process, which was very transparent, and they asked for RFPs for my job, and so I'm very happy to be there. And I hope that I'll have their support and their trust. And as the councillors, Deputy Mayor also sits on our board, is very active, and we're very happy to have him there as your representative. He comes every month to our meetings, and I hope you all receive our minutes and our financial statements. So I don't think you'll have any surprises today in my presentation, because Mr. Thibodeau, I know that you're always up to date with our activities. So this year, since I took this position, we started to reflect upon where we want to focus. Our objectives for this year, with respect to our mandate and the vision of the board and the organization, was to increase the people that would come to the capital in the year, and to make sure that the quality and experience of the public would be at its best. So with these objectives in mind, I'll present our budget. It's not very much different than that of previous years. We're not asking for any increases this year for our operations. We had a small increase. Our total budget is under 1.4 million. I don't know the percentage of the increase, but it's very low. It's just to reflect a few more presentations that we were offering this year. Last year we started this way, and it had a good effect for us. We control the activities better. We rely less on rent of our spaces, so we were better able to identify the concerts we wanted to offer. Last year was not very good for us financially. We have a deficit of $60,000, and our colleagues in our region didn't have a good year either in 2013, 2014. We don't know if it was the transport costs or fuel. So we were happy to hear that it wasn't only a negative impact for us, but for others as well in the region. This year we have a surplus of $1,600 this year, so we're very happy with this result. So here is the categories. We have grants that you offer, which is 84,000. Riverview as well contributes 74,000, in Moncton $399,000, and Heritage Canada as well gives us a grant of $50,000 for our presentations, which are artistic nature. They have a certain value, but it's harder to show them on the market. But they have a large support from the government, and it's very important to give diverse presentations where arts and cultures can be appreciated. So all these public grants, this represents $642,000. We have revenues, we have sales of services, revenues from other sources, renting of halls. When artists come, Louis-José Aude, for example, rents the hall, and we get good revenues from that. $72,000 from people, and our theater school, $55,000. Our foundation is $45,000. It's been in existence since year 2000. We have interest proceeds from investments of $45,000. So that's very good when you take into consideration the market that wasn't very good this fall. So we hope to get their support again this fall. We have another source of revenue. It wasn't on the radar this summer, but now we offer courses, circus training for Atlantic Circus, which was in the old terminal on Main Street. Their rental was over, so they're giving courses in our theater now. So we'll see how much it will bring. We're not sure how much. Now we had to renovate the hall. We had to pay insurance, marketing, and salaries for the teachers. So we hope at least it will be another source of revenue for us, and children will come into the building as well, and they will appreciate our concerts. So our revenues, since we're a nonprofit organization, we're incorporated and registered, our expenses match our revenues. So here you see the total categories: administration, which are salaries, $362,000, occupation for the space. It's a big building. We have 4 spaces in the capital principal area, the Empress Theater, and the balconies and the foyer. So we have a lot of square feet to heat, and we have presentations, $188,000. Technical costs are $186,000. Marketing and publicity is $153,000. Ticketing as well, $106,000. The theater school brings us $75,000. We have general costs and auxiliary expenses. So the revenues match the expenses. This is just an overview of all the activities that we present in a year. We have 350 in a year, or 60,000 people come to the theater for a lot of different shows, events, receptions, launchings, meetings, the art gallery. There are a lot of things happening daily, in the evenings too, all the time. Our staff is full-time. We have 10 people. We have part-timers at ticketing, for instance, 15 people that work a few hours a month. We have also volunteers. It's a very important service. You'll see them at the casino as well. We have another source of revenue there. They needed volunteers as well to assist people. So they're interested in going there as well to offer their services, and we get fees from the casino. We have a committee of volunteers for the second year. They have given a grant, an education grant for a member of their immediate family, and that was a good act to recognize their service and their volunteering. We have 20 people in the community that give us their expertise voluntarily on the board. And on the committees, we have theater courses and circus as well. So we have 500 people that will take classes a year without having bought tickets either. So I think it's a good thing to give people these opportunities. So I spoke to you about our mandate, which is to present shows of all sorts, of all disciplines, which being dance, classic, humor, theater. That is our mandate at the Capitol Theatre. And we need diverse revenue sources, like I mentioned. So some people say, why did a certain artist did not arrive? Perhaps it wasn't within our programming objectives for that year. Sometimes we didn't get an offer. Sometimes artists would rather go to the casino or maybe to the Peace Center or the Wesleyan because the hall is bigger. So there are a lot of factors involved. We collaborate, we cooperate with other theaters, the Playhouse in Fredericton, where we can take advantage of certain savings, but some people are in the region and we try to get them at the capital as well in our programming. We have an important heritage as well. We engage corporate research associates to do a survey of the market. We've received a lot of comments, and a lot of people really appreciate the building, the hall. It's got a nostalgic feel, and they're attached to it. I explained a while ago in our budget, this is our operating budget, but we also have a budget for improvements to the building and equipment. That isn't part of the grant that you give us, but Moncton give us a grant of $100,000 per year, and we'll match that fund with all the ticket sales. So we can invest approximately $200,000 into the building for renovations so that it can be the best technology available so that we can attract the best artists for our shows. So we do it with these funds, and every year we can invest. This spring, we sent an application to Heritage Canada, and with the elections in October, we're not sure what the decision will be, but we hope that if this grant is approved, we would be able to plan for a lot of renovations for about $1 million. So that's a long-term prediction for us for the building, so that it can be of good quality. We just finished the first generation of renovations. It's been 23 years now. So we need a bit of a facelift now so that the artists can be welcomed and the public as well. So we hope that the new minister will take to heart our project. And for us as well, education is very important for the next generation. Those youth that are passionate about arts and culture, we're going to offer opportunities of professional development for our staff. We're not many, but we work very hard, and we want more training for our technicians as well. So we're looking for grants from other organizations as well so that our technicians be well trained on the new equipment. We always want to cooperate with others in the arts and culture sector. Here are the list of groups with which we work this year to promote their projects as well. Everything that can bring a better quality of life for our citizens. It's very important. So we'll give the human resources or financial resources necessary We've had grants, I spoke about that. This year we have a new prize to a member of the community who works very hard in the Arts and Culture Center. Paulette Theriault won this year the Proscenium Award. She's a counselor with the City of Moncton. She works very hard with the Fry Festival and Aberdeen and Moncton. So I just wanted to remind you why it is important to contribute to the capital, because it's the only center of arts and technology in southeast of New Brunswick. We have equipment that allows us to invite artists and excellent shows that are not possible in other parts of the region, and we take to heart these shows that are varied in this region. So to come back on the survey, we hired corporate research associates. We wanted this information. We did not pay for the 15 years that I've been there. It was important that we get information so that we could make good decisions in the future. On a marketing aspect in the future is very important. Communication with our public is important so that they make sure that they know about the events that we're presenting. We wanted to know what they liked, why they come, or why not, so that we could understand what the tendencies of the public were. So it was very important that the board saw that it was a necessary expense. We were happy with the results. We didn't want to receive 100% in all categories, but we saw, as you see, that the community believes that we're an important integral part of their life. We're friendly, welcoming, traditional, accessible, exciting, but we have to think about it. Do we want to be more modern? Will it bring a larger public, or will we lose? So to get the right information to guide us, we hired an expert on the national scene, and in February we will receive a report and a strategic marketing plan for the next 3 years. So we're very excited to be able to have a good plan and to have the expert opinion of this woman. And we took on this work without increasing our budget and our revenue sources. They were stable last year. We just made readjustments in the marketing category because we really wanted this information and recommendations. In the public in general, I just gave you a few slides here that explains certain information. We saw that residents of the Greater Moncton, 37% came to the capital in the last 2 years. Well, why not everybody? I didn't really like this figure, but it's honest and it can give us information. Maybe our programming wasn't to their expectation. There could be a lot of factors that could lead to this result. So we have to know where we are so that we can know where we want to go. 72% knew about the Capitol Theatre, were familiar with it. 73% had recommended an event or performance. And within our clients, 96% had a very good favorable opinion. 95% thought it was of a good value, that the price was good, so maybe we could even increase the price. 88% would recommend us. That was a determining factor for marketing. 45% came to 3 or more events each 2 years. So we would have liked to have 100% results, but at least this way we can see where we have to put our efforts so that we can get a wider public. I just want to mention that about our vision. So we're looking towards the future. We always want to stay pertinent and important for the public. We want people to be proud and be at ease at the Capitol, and we want to present good events. So this is my presentation for my budget, and I'm ready to answer any of your questions. Are there any questions for Ms. Rayworth? None. It was very clear. Thank you very much for your excellent work. We will take your request into consideration when we have our budget deliberations. Thank you. Now we have a presentation of expansion Dieppe. Monsieur Godbout will present. That's it, Mr. Deputy Mayor. You're well, councillors. Good evening. As you have seen, we've had deliberations that were very animated. We won't have any increases in our budget. So I will go to the last slide, which will show that. But I think I'll take a bit of time to show you what we're doing. So first of all, I want to mention the members of our board of directors. Some are sitting among you, the volunteers, and in the hall here. We have Alan Burns, the president, Guylaine Gauvin, our vice president. As well on our team, we have Guy Léger here tonight with us. I also wanted to take 2 minutes to talk to you about what we have done on our strategic plan, because you were invited to attend this session in January, as well as the directors of the city and the members of the board. I want to take the time to tell you what was the result of the work to which you participated in the front. Our major accomplishments for us was the creation of a new strategic plan from 2015 to 2020, and the creation of an implementation plan of what we wanted to do during 2015, a portion of the strategic plan for the next 5 years. This is a new tool for our team. We also wanted to mention that we sold a property in the downtown that will be the new home of the hotel and conference center. So we sold this property, which is now in the project of the downtown, for this project that was started in the beginning of 2000. It was major for us with the construction permits. This was the best for our last 4 years, May to October, and it's a record year for non-residential investments. 2015 was very interesting, and I'll give you the figures later. Here are the priority axes. Firstly is the heart of our mandate. It's to attract and expand business from 2 to 6, or development community projects. And we're focusing firstly to increase the fiscal base of the municipality. In the downtown, Boulevard Dieppe, and business park and technology, and the industrial park and the future phases. The first slide I have with figures are respecting construction permits from 2003 to 2015. We have figures here up until the end of October as published by the municipality. In blue, we have non-residential. In gold, above, we have the residential figures. So you will note that we have an increase with respect to non-residential since the last 3 years, and residential is about $20 million over the past 3 years. In non-residential, it's this figure is unbelievable, and we're happy to see this increase. We have a majority in the Dieppe Industrial Park that we sold that property, and I'll give you the figures a little later, and which figures are representative. First of all, I would like to refresh your memory with what has been built in the last year with a few photos. I'll give you a few pictures of investments. In certain cases, you'll say, well, it was already there, like Plaza Corp, for instance, on Champlain. But we're mentioning the rentals and the businesses in there. Here we have 4 of them that were established during the year in this building. After that, we have rentals at CF Champlain, Cadillac Fairview, Champlain. You will see that soon. And afterwards, Starbucks. We have 2 of them. One is open and the other one is being built on Amiro. And we have the former old Crystal Palace, which is now the Bass Pro Shops. Apartments on Champlain, which was rebuilt after a fire, and the dental clinic in Champlain near downtown, near the market, and the operations center of the Moncton Airport on Aviation Street. So the operations have now moved into this building. Here we have construction on Aviation Street with CE3 Electronics, which was former Custom Electronic Assemblies. So this was a nice building. It's even got green grass. Village on Boulevard Dieppe. That's was good investment, $7 million. Atlantic Motorplex on Champlain, Dieppe Auto, which has 2 buildings now, one for Volkswagen, the other one for Audi. That's a good investment from the private sector this year. The next slide are the investments. So we're looking to see what has taken place with our provisions. So we have comparisons of 2014, total investments of 57 million, actuals of 2015 up until the end of October, almost 69 million. Predictions in this case, we don't see any larger projects. Maybe some small ones, but not very big ones, who are looking for construction permits for November and December. And taxes for the new construction in our fiscal base, according to construction permits, which will be evaluated, which will be usually different from this one. which will add $1.6 million to the tax base.
The investment sectors, and this is what will be reflected in the next phase. Here, you're seeing only the areas where we've had a direct impact already. The downtown area around Place 1604 with all of the development of the downtown, the lots that were developed and that were merged to create this whole space for the development of Place 1604 and all the way up to Normandy Street, because we've acquired and resold some lots there. And then along Dieppe Boulevard, the Business and Technology Park, but only as far as Chartersville. Further than Chartersville, we didn't have a direct influence in the investments. And then the Industrial Park and Aviation Avenue, these were all done with investments from us or our participation in them. So I'm trying to show the return on the investment here, conservatively. So if you look at the figures in front of you, in the first column, you'll see a division between the different sectors, the investment sectors I just mentioned, the downtown, the business and technology area, Dieppe Boulevard, and the industrial park in 3 different zones along Aviation Avenue. And then east of Dieppe Boulevard, that's what had already been developed. And then, the east of Dieppe Boulevard. No, that's right. And west of Dieppe Boulevard is the original part of the industrial park, mostly lands that belong to Irving. So what you see here are the current assessments of these areas, of these, and the property tax that they bring in every year. Now, if you look just for the industrial park, there's about $6 million of property tax that comes back to the city every year. Now, what's interesting in that figure is that if you look at the investments that were made this year in that area, if you include, there's about 31 million in the downtown area, for example. If you just look at the lands that were developed in the industrial park at large, and the Business and Technology Center were also lands that we developed, but based on the building permits in 2015, it would be another $29 million. So it's a 10% increase in 1 year on the tax base, in the lands that we had a direct role in the development of. So it means that the investments that we make to make these lots accessible, to allow the developers set up and do business here, really bring in a lot. So just to give you an idea, I mean, this is one way of measuring the return on investment of the investments made by the city or by ourselves or by us through the city in the development of these sectors. I also wanted to give you an idea of the plan that we have for expansion Dieppe before we run out of land, because if somebody's looking for a lot, they will find something that is suitable. But I had already mentioned in the past that we're already working on the next phase, phases 2 and 3 of the development. And this is what we're forecasting today. We're still working with engineering firms towards the development, the design of these phases, of these lots. But we're hoping that the lots will be available, that we will be ready for the first shovel, that we be shovel ready. That's our objective by next year. And the investments won't be to $10.5 million before we find the money to make these initial investments. So that means that what we're requesting for a budget is just for our operational budget. We're not asking for anything for these capital investments. Which brings me to my last slide. So here is our budget request. In the first column, you see what we're asking for from the city for the operational budget. You see the 2015 budget with a comparator. If you go down to the bottom line, you'll see that the same thing is being asked as last year, $971,000. But if you start at the bottom and read up, there's an amount in the budget this year for the interest on loans the savings on the loans, on the interest on loans that we paid back. So we're reinvesting those amounts in order to balance our budget for next year, because really our operational budget went up by 2.3%. Now you see the overhead and fixed costs. There's no increase being asked for here. In the variable cost, there's a minor variation of 8%. That's the cost of a summer job. We're transforming our archives into an electronic version, and so we're using a summer student, and some of our staff people are working on it as well. We also want to replace the receptionist. Now we see the priorities and other pillars. Here we see an increase of 24%. The biggest increase here is the increase in our own property tax. We had a big increase this year in our property tax. We had some lands that we sold, but a lot of them increased in value. So even if we have a lot of land in 2015, we have less land in 2015 than in 2014, but the value has gone up tremendously. So that's one of the reasons to explain that increase. And in the downtown area, we're going to combine the next two lines. There are two lines together here. There's 2015, we had asked for $70,000. And this year it went down. We'd asked for 110,000. We went down to 95,000 this year because we were able to combine our finances to pay back a debt that we had. So that gives us savings on the interest that are being reinvested into the budget. So that is what we are asking for this year. And I would like to wrap up on that, and thank you for your attention. And thank you for listening to me. Are there any questions from councillors? If none, yes, Councillor Béliveau. Thank you, Your Worship, your Deputy Mayor. I have a comment. It's very interesting to be able to see an agency state that they can maintain their direct costs at the same level year over year. I don't know what your secret is, but we would encourage you to get a patent on that secret, and you'll make a fortune. Has there been a decrease? No, there's been no decrease. It's just the way in our funds were managed, because we have capital that are invested in different things, but their funding is a part of our operational budget, and that's what happened this year. My predecessor had gotten involved in a program to combine our debts, and that pays big dividends, and we have finished setting it up in January of this year, so it's given big dividends. Now, I can't guarantee that there's no increase in our operational budget. As a matter of fact, there will be an increase in our operational budget, but we're still being able to maintain what we're requesting from Municipal Council overall. Well, great job. Thank you. And it's the what was being requested. It's what was approved by the Board of Directors at our last meeting. Thank you, Mr. Godbout, and congratulations for a great job. Continue your good work. And the next group will be Transequa.
No.
Right. We'll see. Okay.
Alors, bonsoir, messieurs et madame.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen from Trans-Iqua, we're very pleased to welcome you here this evening to hear your budget request presentation. Mr. Pierce, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yes?
Okay. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Councillors, we're pleased to be here tonight and representing Trans-Aqua, or as most of you will have probably remembered us, the Greater Moncton Wastewater Commission. Before I start, I'd just like to introduce several people that I have with me tonight. I've got two commissioners who I think need very little introduction here. Chanel Michaud and Julie Thériault, who of course are representing you on our commission. So we don't really have to do too much introduction there. But I'm also pleased to introduce our new general manager, Kevin Rice, who's recently joined us from St. John. We hired him away from St. John. He worked so hard last winter getting rid of the snow in St. John that he decided he wanted to come to Moncton. Not that I think he's going to get very much less snow, but anyway, we're pleased to have him. And I'm going to use all three of them to make the presentation tonight. I thought perhaps it might be better to do it that way and let them do the presentation to you. Whoa, sorry. Yeah. I ended up. That's the first one. The second one is.
That's the slide that we have on our paper also. That's the one we have.
Okay, I think we've got a little technical problem. You haven't got the stick here. Okay, I think if everybody's okay with it, certainly we'll just talk you through it because I have we've got a PowerPoint presentation which we sent to the city, and obviously all we've got is the budget and not the rest of it. But okay, let's just talk our way through it. It's not a lot of, and I apologize for that. First of all, I'd like to just give you just a quick introduction to our vision and mission statement, which I think most of you have heard before. But our vision is to be an outstanding environmental steward, supporting regional planning, economic development, and quality of life in the communities of Dieppe, Riverview, and Moncton. Our mission is to collect waste and treat wastewater in a reliable, cost-efficient, and environmentally responsible manner. And I think those are the those, I think you people understand that we're trying to do our best in that way. And what I'd like to do is talk to you, introduce the various 4 strategies that we're using to get into effect the vision and mission, and to carry on through that, and then to eventually introduce the budget to you. I want to turn over to Julie to talk about the 3 strategies, talk about some of the things we're doing in the way of projects that are coming up. We might as well let the engineer talk about those things and how these things are going to happen, what we're going to do to improve the quality of the water that goes through, and so on. Julie?
Merci, Win. On va faire travailler la...
Thank you, Win. As Win was saying then, in order to respect our mission, we have different strategic priorities that we set. The first one is to minimize the negative effects of the operations of the Commission on the environment. In order to do that, one of our major priorities is to have secondary treatment. In order to do so, we have an infrastructure plan, a financing plan, and we're still waiting for the final word on the funding part, but we have moved ahead. Certain things have already been done. For example, the detailed design of phase 1, it's almost finished, as a matter of fact, for the preliminary treatment. Also, the sludge reception areas, that's about $10.6 million out of an estimated total of $75 to $80 million. That will be the total budget cost. The tenders for this phase will be called shortly, in early 2016, hoping for building to start in the spring. So we'll be digging that first shovelful of dirt. Now for phase 2, the design work will start in 2016, and we're hoping to begin construction in 2017. And for the secondary treatment, we'll see how far we go. But our objective is still to have it by 2020 fully implemented. We're still investigating the different funding options, seeing as we haven't received any commitment from any of the levels of government. So we have to look at different options. And on another note, we have another project underway to minimize the negative effects of the operations. We have a project to add deflectors in the combined sewers, and this is in order to control when we have overflows or so on, heavy rains. It's to maintain the solid waste so it doesn't harm the environment. This is a part of our control strategy for the sanitary sewer overflow. So that is for that part, this first priority. The second priority is the vision with the municipal and community partners. Now we're continuing to work with you, with our municipal partners, by having financial and technical discussions. Our staff, our chief CFO regularly consults with the people from the finance branch of the different municipalities. We have a technical committee made up of all our technical people at the commission, as well as engineers of the municipality, meet monthly to deal with different things that affect us, us and you. Now, we've started to work on the development of a general agreement that would cover the cost sharing between Transaqua and the municipality whenever we have projects that affect each of us. And if we have benefits, for example, in the case of the collector sewer for Babineau, collector sewer, well, we have an agreement, a general agreement to govern the further projects, and we have specific agreements with Dieppe, for example, that will allow us to share any benefits eventually. And that was priority number 2. Priority number 3 is long-term economic feasibility and reliability. Of course, it's a great thing to add new infrastructure, but you have to make sure existing infrastructure remains. And we have an interesting project that will be implemented this year with public safety. Public Safety Canada is working on an assessment of emergency measures regionally to assess our level of readiness to an emergency. So we're a part of that program. They're going to visit our facilities. They're going to identify any gaps and shortcomings, make recommendations to us. So we're really happy to be able to participate in that initiative because we'll be able to benefit from their expertise and be more ready to respond to any emergency. In the asset management as well, we're hoping to develop a computerized asset management plan for maintenance and prevention. It'll be easier to know exactly what we have to do in terms of preventive maintenance at any given time. And in terms of long-term sustainability, our 3rd major project is at the composting station. We're for a 3rd level of maturing. Because with the secondary treatment that we're going to have even more sludge prepared. So we're going to be able to use that to make compost. So we want to make sure we have the necessary infrastructure in order to be able to take in that extra volume. Now, the last priority, number 4, the financial feasibility and economic feasibility. This is to identify any possibilities with the different levels of government to be able to secure funding for a project, and we're trying to present the different options to them by focusing on the impact that this will have on taxpayers to have the best option for funding possible. Now, in terms of long-term sustainability and financial feasibility, we have a team that is responsible for the pre-selection of future equipment, and that's really great because we want to make sure we have the best technology available and get the best quality price ratio for our future operations. So we're putting that, there's things that we want to keep, there are things that we want to make sure that we maintain, and so all of that is being looked at carefully. Now, the financial plan for the secondary treatment, we're in 2015, soon to be 2016. 2020 is just around the corner. And we're continuing to work on a meeting with governments. It hasn't been easy for the last 2.5 years. We've started steps. We've had 2 different changes of government, one at the federal level, one at the provincial government. So things are gelling, things are starting to come together, but we do need your support. And I just wanted to point out that without the financial support, we're going to have to borrow considerable sums of money, and unfortunately, that would have to increase the user fees. And we really don't want to do that. We want to be able to have the least impact on the taxpayers as possible. So that is that. Now, for regulations, we had a great table to show you the different parameters, the different standards and criteria, but you won't see them here tonight. But essentially, what we're being asked to do under the new regulations on the effluents, municipal effluents, so we have to reduce the concentration of certain elements to ensure the aquatic safety. We have certain objectives that must be met, and with the treatments being proposed, we should exceed those standards. We also want to, and this isn't a requirement by the federal government, but we're adding UV disinfection, mostly, well, because there's been a number of surfers on the Petit Kodiak River recently, so we want to make sure we want to control the bacteria count as much as possible, and through the UV we'll be able to do that and be aligned to the recommendations put out by Health Canada for aquatic and marine activities. And you can't see the mock-up here, but what we were adding, we're going to add a bioreactor. Currently, the water comes to the plant. It goes through a first filter, a sand filter, a purifier, and then the water is sent back to the river. Now, instead of being sent immediately to the river, it'll be sent to a bioreactor where there's going to be all sorts of bacteriological reactions that will remove certain bacteria. And then there will be another decantation stage and disinfection. So there are 3 new phases will be added to ensure a better quality of the effluent. So that was my part of the presentation, and now we're going to talk about the budget. Thank you, Madame Thériault. Thank you. Yeah, all of that is all well and good, but it all costs money. So, so you've just received all sorts of information now. I'm sure I'm just going to give you just a few figures. Now, of course, we're talking about a $90 million project, and it takes funding, of course. It takes financing. That's one of the priorities for 2016. And we're going to have to work towards it. It really is becoming one of our priorities, to make sure that we acquire the funding. In 2016, we're also going to have our first collective agreement. The collective bargaining is underway currently. It's been going on for a few months, and eventually it will wrap up. So I'm sure we'll be able to settle all that in 2016. Now, what'll that mean for our 2016 year? I'm sorry, could you just speak a little closer to the microphone, please? Thank you. So now, what's most interesting to you, of course, in the budget is the unit price, right? By unit price, well, since 2012, we had an agreement, and we would increase it by 2% or $5. And it's still that $5 that's going to go up every year. This year, it's going to bring it back. It's going to bring it up to 2.10, so 2.44% actually. And expenses, the capital expenses, in our budget scenarios, we do not include the outside financing. So whatever outside funding that we do receive will reduce the figures that we have. Now, in the budget, you see that we focus on communication. We want to make sure that the messages are well delivered to all of our partners, to the municipalities, and the capital budget will reflect what Julie just mentioned in terms of the upgrading of the secondary treatment. And you have to put cement in and then some more cement, and of course cement is very expensive and we have to use a lot of it. Now, what does that mean in the operating budget? Well, we had a little bit of surprise. Sometimes you win the battle and you lose the war, but we won the battle a couple of years ago in terms of property tax. They realized that we have tunnels underground, and they finally realized that they could also tax our tunnels underground. And that'll cost $311,000. So we're going to fight it, but it's a fairly hefty bill that is going to be reflected in our expenses. That is the biggest increase actually and we hadn't planned on that at all. Now we have a new initiative for the computerized maintenance management. What we want to do is ensure the sustainability of our equipment. We want to have a computer system that is going to make sure that our employees are going to be use it to see what repairs were done on what equipment. What do we expect as a life cycle? So everybody who works on a certain part or a certain piece of equipment will be able to refer to that computer system to find out what's been done in the past. We're also going to be able to determine if we can outsource things or not, or do things internally. We can do a lot internally. There are certain things we can do with summer students, for example, instead of hiring a company. We want to look at all of that as well. And of course, we have to ensure our succession planning. That's very important. And we also what Julie talked to you about, the bioreactor. These are the big electrical consumers. We have some projects underway today on how to reduce your electric use, but we have to determine what our costs are going to be. Last year we talked about snow. Well, we had snow too. So this year in our budget, of course, we had to increase our budget for snow removal after the winter we had last year, of course. And we're trying to compensate for the aging of the infrastructure. We want to make sure we keep them up to date so we don't have to make major investors too soon. Now, another thing you'll see in this year's budget is that we want our laboratory to be accredited by CALA. It's a Canadian agency that will certify the lab to make sure that we can do the tests once the systems will be implemented. We want to be recognized as a certified lab. Now, Julie mentioned the project with Public Safety Canada. It's an assessment project underway to determine regional resilience. It's like there is a summer student project for them, and we'll see what recommendations come out of it. Budget priorities, we're talking about agreements with all of the municipalities, and Dieppe is really in advance here because the commission started in 1983, and in 1985 there was already a bylaw in city for an agreement between the commission and the city. And we don't have that with the other municipalities, but we had one since 1985, signed by Mayor Malenfant at the time here in Dieppe. And this is the base document that we want to use as a basis for further agreements with the other municipalities.
Then we will put into effect sharing of costs. We talked about it this week. We're going to have more exchanges of this type in the future. We're going to implement a federal agreement as well, and a model of FAS Phase 1 in 2016 of the new work, the property. We're going to look for RFPs. We're going to start sending out RFPs so that people will see that we're going ahead. We're looking for financing. If we can't get it, we'll find it ourselves. So that is the main part of my presentation. Now I'm going to ask Kevin to present the figures. It'll give you a little bit more color. Thank you, Mr. Richaud. Excuse me, my French vocabulary is a bit limited, so I will speak in English.
Expenditures, when we look at the numbers, the main differences between 2015 and 2016 with respect to the capital expenditures for our biological treatment, we're expecting to spend in the order of $6.4 million, and that is to upgrade and expand our bioscreens, our grit tanks, and our septage receiving facilities. So that is phase one of the major capital upgrade that's required. So we are expecting to break the ground next spring with this phase one project. So the compost facility for capital expenditures, we expect to install a curing pad, and that is in anticipation of the additional biosolids that will be created from the secondary treatment process. So we are being very proactive in making sure that we have the biosolids composting facility prepared for the expansion. Operating administrative capital expenditures are just kind of replacing equipment. We need a new loader, some other types of equipment that are required, and we see some collector system projects for CSOs with respect to Jonathan Creek and Dowd Street, for example. In our 2016 total operating expenditures, the major differences between 2015 and 2016, they're related directly to electricity, consumer price index, some chemical costing for our actual usage of chemicals. The main implication in the budget in 2016 that we did not anticipate was that our property tax assessment was increased by 100%. Of course, we are protesting that property tax assessment, but that was in the order of a $300,000 increase to our budget for 2016 that we were required to plan for. So there's a major increase in expenditure there. With respect to our operating surplus, that is intentional with respect to being able to resume our capital infrastructure investment in our upgrade and our long-term planning as well. So basically, with respect to one of the main things that we looked at for cost sharing in 2015, we had allocated $2.9 million for the Babineau Creek trunk sewer. If that's not paid out in 2015, we will carry that over into 2016 until we can have that formal agreement in place, and that's when we expect the potential to be paying that cost sharing agreement. I'll pass it back over to Wynne for finishing.
Thank you, Mr. Rice.
Well, thank you very much for the folks that have gotten us through this far. I just want to mention a couple of other things before we wrap it up here today, and I do apologize for the mix-up in the presentation, because we're a little surprised at that. It came out, but don't know, got a little changed somehow in the translation. So anyway, we will, I think probably what we should do is send a copy of the presentation, or ask that a copy of the presentation go out to council so that you can have a look at it after the fact, because basically we've said it, and there's some nice pictures to accompany it and see some of the things you said. Okay, thanks. Good. I think the one or two, just a couple more things I'd just like to talk about. One of the things that we are looking for, of course, is community support, our stakeholder support in our getting the funding from the three levels of government. We've approached you, and in fact, I think in the presentation we said we're using that we're going to approach you, but I think we've already sent something off to you, and I think there might be a motion in coming up in the not too distant future where we've asked you to simply say again the support that you gave us about a year ago, which we're trying to get back, and sort of say, okay, folks, as far as the feds and the province are concerned, the city of Dieppe is behind us. You probably won't have to say the thing that you did in last year, which was we want to get the road across the marsh first. So at least that one's behind us, and we're hoping that you might think of us a little higher priority this year. With that, I'd just like to really finish up and say that we see the benefits of the delivery of the improved secondary treatment coming to us in 2020, which will, I think, put us in a position where we can take a little better advantage of that river we have over there. And they're really, one of the things that's going to come out of it, we're going to be producing an output that will have 97% of the solids removed from it, and that's pretty good. At the moment, we're doing about 75%. We're going to get that up to about 97%. We're going to also be adding UV treatment that will improve the water even more, so we'll produce recreational quality water that's coming back out of the pipe, and so we're kind of looking forward to that. So I think that everybody in the municipality will, I think, look forward to that. I'd certainly like to answer any questions that you might have. Throw it open to questions, and we'd be glad to answer anything that you might like to ask.
Any questions from the members of the council? Okay, then. Thank you very much for the presentation. It seemed that it was really clear, and we will take this into consideration when we discuss our budget.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps I should, just to reiterate, we didn't really come asking for anything. As you know, we're kind of budget is going to be voted on actually tomorrow night by the commission, as we, I think, sent a letter to the city about 45 days ago and sent the budget and all of that. It's been worked out between your financial people and our financial people, and I think what we wanted, I guess the big thing you people have to think about is $5 that we're looking for in the increase, which is really inflation, 2.5%, and we're trying to keep it there. And hopefully, if we get some federal funding, we will keep it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ça, je pense. C'est la commission.
The next presentation is the Pest Control Commission of Greater Moncton, and the presenter is Al Cunningham. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and members of the council. My name is Al Cunningham. I'm Secretary Treasurer of the Pest Control Commission of Greater Moncton. That word is difficult to pronounce in French.
Limited, so I will make my presentation in English, if I may. On behalf of Dr. Lapierre, who sends his regrets that he is unable to attend this evening due to a previous engagement. This sheet, the first sheet, indicates the good news. The budget for the Commission for 2016 is $372,221. Compared to last year, it's a slight reduction from last year. And this represents 4 years in a row where we've been able to take advantage of improved efficiencies in our operation, staff experience. We have an assistant general director who is now in his 4th year. And every year he is learning the job a little bit better and is able to bring about some efficiencies, particularly with his ability to carry out maintenance on our equipment. And we've streamlined team operations with addition of new equipment, the new Argo, the Marsh vehicle, makes it much more efficient to apply the insecticide. One of the major budget expenses for 2016, just to highlight those, if you look through the listing, salaries are a major component of our cost, but they are slightly reduced again from last year and the years before. One reason is that we take advantage of the fact that some of the students often indicate to us that in mid-August they'd like to return to school or take some time off or whatever, and instead of budgeting for the entire summer period to the end of August, which is the end of our actual operations, we cut back on the budgeted amount for the student salaries. And the other major component of our operation, major cost, is the purchase of the larvicide, which is about $75,000. The new purchases for for the years ahead Dr. Lapierre wanted to point out to this council and the other councils that we are planning to purchase another Argo. This is one of the marsh vehicles in 2017 to cover the Riverview marshes. And it gives me an opportunity also to mention that the Riverview marsh we're referring to is where the lake used to be. And because of the gates being opened and all that mud flat that you see, I'm sure you've noticed it from time to time. The mud flat, last year, the vegetation was finally able to take over some of the marsh area, and next year you'll see it even more so. And this is going to lead to puddles that will be prime breeding areas for mosquitoes. And Dr. Lapierre is very fearful that, and I think he's mentioned this before to all councils in the province, that as this marsh develops, if we want to continue the level of service and eradicate the mosquito population, the mosquito larvicide as much as we can, then obviously there's going to be a cost involved. So he's anticipating that, and I'm sure he'll have more to say about that in the future. I think that just an overview of the operations for this past year. We had a very successful summer in controlling the larvicide populations. Even though the precipitation in April and July was a little more than normal, we were able to get an early start. If you recall, we had such a bad winter last year that there was still snow on the ground in April and almost into May in some of the marshes. It delayed the development of the mosquitoes, and the timing couldn't have been better. We had our student staff coming on, and by the end of April, and we were able to get at that first emergence of mosquitoes, if you will. And because of that, we had a very successful year that in controlling the mosquito population. We had very good support from the summer staff again. And the monitoring and control of water retention sites. That's another issue that Dr. Lapierre has brought to our attention. These stormwater retention ponds that are being created along with new development, new residential development. I'm sure your engineering department has mentioned this to you in the past. These retention ponds are becoming an issue if they're not properly maintained, so we monitor those very closely, and there is concern that unless maintenance is done on those, they'll become mosquito breeding areas. So that's my presentation for this evening. If there are any questions, I would attempt to answer them on behalf of Dr. Lapierre.
Vous avez une question, Madame la conseillère Dallaire.
I have a question from Councillor Dallaire. Thank you.
I might have missed it. I see that insurance costs are down quite significantly from, or up quite down, yeah, no, from 2015, 5,000 to 3,000. Do you have an explanation as to why?
We do procure our insurance through the City of Moncton. We piggyback on their insurance rates, and for whatever reason, I'm not sure the reason, but we've gotten a very favorable rate from them, from their insurer. So as a result, you see the savings nearly $2,000, or actually $2,000 next year.
Okay, thank you.
Il y a d'autres questions?
Other questions?
So thank you very much, Mr. Cunningham.
Merci.
And you did a good job by reducing our budget, so we're happy.
We can't promise that every year, but we do our best. Thank you. Merci.
Yep. Bon, alors c'était la dernière présentation pour ce soir. Alors,
So this was the last presentation for this evening. The process budget will start next next Tuesday evening on November 24th. So good night, everybody.